Hello and welcome to this session on manipulating the objects. To start with, keep this right hand panel open by pressing the keyboard shortcut N. So, when we press N, you can see this window, transform window is open. Okay, keep this open. Now, select the cube with left click and press G on your keyboard, and as you move your mouse, see the cube can be moved anywhere in this space, and as you are moving, you can see in the transform window how the x, y, z values are getting manipulated. Now, as you are moving, if you right click, your movement will be cancelled. Now, again I will press G and I will move somewhere here, and if I left click, that movement will be confirmed. Right now, this object has moved from 0, 0, 0 to some other location. At any point of time, if you want to reset this location back to 0, the keyboard shortcut is Alt plus G. So, as soon as I press Alt plus G, the cube is reset to its center. Now, similar to this, instead of G, now press R. Now, when I press R, you can see this can be rotated, and you can now see in the transform window the rotation values are changing. You can see the rotation value changing there, and even here if I right click, this rotation will be cancelled. If I will press again R and I will rotate some angle, and if I left click, that rotation will be applied. Again, if you want to reset this rotation back to 0, keyboard shortcut is Alt plus R. So, the values are now set to 0, 0, 0, and similar to this, if you press S on your keyboard, you can scale this, and as you scale this, you can see the scale values are changing. Again here if I right click, the scale will be cancelled, but if I again press S, scale it, and if I left click, the scale will be applied. Now again you can also reset this scale to 1, 1, 1 by pressing Alt plus S. So, G is for grab, R is for rotate, S is for scale. However, the same manipulations can also be carried out by using the tools here. You have move tool. If I select the move tool, you are seeing here the 3 arrows. We call this as the gizmo. In this gizmo, the red arrow moves the cube along the x axis, y arrow moves it along the y axis. You can see in the transform only y value is changing, and blue will move it along the z axis. Similarly, you have one blue square here. If I click this and drag it, it is now moving in xy axis. If I click on this red icon, it is moving in YZ axis, and if I click on the green icon, it is moving in XZ axis. So, in this way, we can manipulate the movement using the gizmo. The same thing applies to rotation also. If I select the rotation tool, you see 3 rotational windows here. Red represents the rotation along x axis, blue represents the rotation along z axis, green represents the rotation along the y axis. We can use this gizmo and we can carry out the rotation. The same thing applies even for scale, and in scale again here if I click at the center, if I click and drag, see now it is scaling along the x axis because I have clicked along the red axis. If I click on this green, it will be scaled along the y axis, and if I click here, this will be scaled along the blue Z axis. Similar to that, if I click on this red icon, it will be scaled along. So, this is in a different rotation, we are not seeing this rotation correctly. So, what I will now do is, I will press Alt S, Alt R and Alt G to reset all the transition, that is transforms. And now, if I click on this red, you can see scaling is happening only along Y and Z axis. Okay. And if I click on the green, scaling is happening only along the X and Z axis, and if I click on blue, scaling is happening only along the X and Y axis. So, this is the way we can manipulate the things. And also we have transform tool, in which we have move, scale and rotate gizmos appearing at a time. However, when we practically do all this transformation, we are not going to use these tools. Everything we are going to work out using keyboard shortcuts. So, to give you an example now, I will press Alt G to reset position, Alt R to reset rotation, Alt S to reset scale. And now, I will come to the selection tool, I will select the cube, and now if I press G and if I press X, you can move it only along the X axis. If I press Y, I can move it only along the Y axis. If I press Z, I can move it only along the Z axis. I will right click and cancel the movement. Similarly, I will again press G, and I now want to move this cube in the axis of X, only XY and not in Z. I want to lock the Z axis. So, then if you press Shift plus Z, now what happens is, you can move this only along the XY axis, you cannot move it along the Z axis. I will right click to cancel it. Similarly, I will select this, first press G, then Shift plus X. Now, I can move it only along the Y and Z axis, X axis is locked. I will right click it, and similarly, I will again press G, and now if I press Shift plus Y, Y axis is locked and I can now move only along the X and Z axis. I will right click to cancel it. The same thing now applies even for rotation. Even in rotation, if I press R and if I press X, I can rotate it only along the X axis. If I press Y, I can rotate it only along the Y axis. If I press Z, I can rotate it only along the Z axis. I will right click to cancel it. Same thing applies even for scale, and if I press scale and if I press X, I can scale it only along X axis. If I press Y, I can scale it only along the Y axis. If I press Z, I can scale it only along the Z axis. Similarly, if I press Shift plus Z, I can only scale it along X and Y axis. If I press Shift and Y, I can scale it only along the X and Z axis, and Shift and X, I can scale it only along Y and Z axis. I will right click to cancel it. So, this is how we carry out the transformation. Remember, the transformation is carried out, all the transformation is carried out only by using keyboard shortcuts. Remember, G is for grab and then use X, Y and Z axis. Say for example, I want to move this cube exactly 2 units along the X axis. Then I will press G, I will press X and I will press 2. Now what happened? This has moved exactly 2 meters along the x axis. Now if I want to move this exactly 5 units along the z axis, what I will do is again press G, then Z, and now press 5 and enter. And now, so now I will press Alt G to move it back to 0, 0, 0. So in this way, also remember, whenever I move the object, I select this, I press G and I make a move, and I will leave the mouse, left click the mouse, immediately you will see a menu here, move menu, and here I can fine tune the movement. Say for example, now I can set the x to 0 and I can set the y to 5 and z to 0, and now this has moved exactly 5 units from y. So I can just grab this, move it and then readjust it using this move panel. Remember, this move panel will move away once I do some other selection. So this is how we manipulate object in Blender. So this is an introduction to this manipulation, and in our next session we are going to deal in detail about how we are going to exactly move object in different parts of the screen. So with this, let us conclude this session, and in the next session we are going to deal with the different kind of objects working in object mode in Blender. This one we are going to explore it in our next session. Thank you.